All right, all right. Welcome everybody to the Hot Seat Automotive Podcast, the place to be for gearheads to talk about all things cars, the automotive industry, and all the things we love as car guys and girls. Tonight, I am thrilled to have this guest, the Brian Barr. Are you kidding me? I met Brian, oh gosh, Brian, what was it? Probably 3, 4 years ago, through the car
Uh,
scene in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. The charisma, the personality, the enthusiasm immediately came through. Anybody who knows Brian knows he's a character. The smile is infectious. I better stop making his head too big, folks. No, but in all seriousness, welcome, Brian. Thrilled to have you tonight, and welcome to the Hot Seat Automotive Podcast.
awesome. I am thrilled to be here, CJ. This is great. Yeah, I mean, I've always said the cars just bring cool people together. That's how I met you.
Oh, listen, I agree. And I appreciate that. Thank you. Let's get right into it, Brian, because I think there's a couple things that I want our listeners to hear, and
Okay.
certainly things I'm interested to learn more about the Brian Barr this evening. First things first, how did you come up as an automotive enthusiast and you parlayed it and you developed it into a career? How many of us would like to make this our sole vocation? Our passion becomes our career. I got to hear the Brian Barr story. I've never heard it. The second thing I really want to take advantage of tonight and pick your brain, you're the inventory manager for Streetside Classics.
Yep.
You know the collectible car market. What the heck is the state of the collectible car market? Is this a good time to buy? Terrible time? Pluses, minuses. We want Brian's point of view on that. But first things first, what's the story of the Brian Barr automotive enthusiast? How did you come to be that? And how'd you parlay it into a career? Go ahead.
Dad, that's how it happened. I came home from the hospital in early November of 1961 in a chopped and channeled 49 Ford. Lake pipes, whole old school build, flathead. That was my dad. So that car, I don't remember it, right? He was a Ford dude. And they only had one car, right? They had come out of the 50s. My dad was a school teacher. My mom was a pharmacist. My mom, one of the second woman ever to graduate from the University of Buffalo Pharmacy School. I grew up with just a bunch of very gregarious educators and folks, and everybody was a car guy. So my dad always had these big floaty Fords, like 57s, all that stuff. When they had me, they went to get a new car. So they went to buy a 61 something. It's going to be a Ford. Dad rolls home in a Bullet Bird.
What was Dad's line of work, Brian?
Well, at that time he was a teacher. He ended up being a school superintendent in Western New York for the Board of Cooperative Educational Services, which is the vocational technical side of things,
Right.
as well as the traditional classroom, which is where I learned my mechanical skills. So
Gotcha.
mom looks at him as the story goes. I don't remember, as an infant. And it's like, Gary Barr, if we can afford a Ford Thunderbird, we can afford two cars.
To
So
which he said,
he goes back to the dealership and got a sensible sedan and brought the 49 home.
wow.
Yeah. But we always had cool cars. And, my dad, and I heard Jay Leno say this. Jay Leno's, when his dad asked him what motor to pick, Jay was always like, "Oh, get the biggest one." But that was my dad. Growing up, we'd have it. We might have this plain Jane LTD, but thing had an FE 390, right? I mean, that's where that came. And I'd listen to my maternal grandfather, my grandfather, and my father, all Ford guys, argue about who made the better option picks on essentially the same car. So like this crazy knowledge. I mean, I just grew up with it. It was just ingrained in me.
Well, it's funny. You're talking about an era when we grew up, when our fathers grew up. There's no replacement for displacement. I mean, it was just different. And I think about everything that you're saying, and it's like, big engine, got to be a V8 in America in that era. The other thing too was the manual transmission. If you had an automatic, it was the kiss of death.
Oh yeah.
My, how things have changed. But go ahead, keep going.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When we made that switch in probably the late 60s into the automatic family. But so I grew up essentially, I'm a New York kid in Western New York, Buffalo, Rochester, the Southern Tier, all that. A lot of it's a different kind of small town America. Uh, my best friend in elementary school, his grandfather ran the Dodge dealer. Right.
Mm.
They had a super, you couldn't sell Superbirds. I distinctly remember Superbird on the showroom Dodge dealer in Olean, New York. Right. I remember riding in the back. Remember the cool 66 Chargers with the dual back seats?
Oh,
That's what,
heck yeah.
that's what we used to go to swim lessons in at the Y. I mean,
Isn't that crazy?
yeah. And, in car culture, my first babysitter, and this is, I remember her name was, remember the cartoon Penelope Pit Stop with Penelope Pit Stop?
100%. Yep.
Yeah, her name was Penelope. She drove a Mach 1. The preacher's kid who also babysat me and my sister, a first gen Camaro. There wasn't anything but a first gen Camaro back then.
Right. That was the Camaro.
Yeah, and I just grew up around that, and like we all had Hot Wheels, all that stuff. The beauty of small town America, these little towns I grew up in, is you'd walk down to the hardware store on a Saturday morning, and there it seemed like it was the size of Walmart. It wasn't, but there are all those models, MPCs, Rebels, you name it, they're all there. And you're building the Red Baron, and you're building 32 Ford Street Rods, and you're building dragsters. And I mean, I wish I still had some of them. I have one or two. The original Hot Wheels when they came out 67, 68. I mean,
Oh,
that was,
gosh.
the fleet side, heavy Chevy, that Corvette. So there had to be a licensing deal with GM in there somewhere.
Well, listen, absolutely. And I can relate. And, you know, just a couple things. I'll never forget, Brian, and you brought up the Superbirds. Yeah, I remember there being a Super Bee. Long story short, because I want to hear more about you, but there was a Super Bee for sale when I was 16 years old. And it was parked by the side of the road. And I think the price was 3,300.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to my dad, multiple times, mind you, Dad, there's the Super Bee. I want the Super Bee. And of course, his answer was no. And he was being a good dad. I'm not criticizing that.
Right.
But I always remind him, Brian, that, hey, if you had let me buy that Super Bee, I'd probably be retired right now.
I have a similar story that involves my college fund, an F production Sprite, and my dad saying, if you do this and go to trade school and go push a broom at Skip Barber Racing, we'll use your college fund and we will go racing. If you want to be a race car driver, that's what we'll do. And then Carol Barr was like, a no son of mine is going to be a race car driver. Ultimately, that happened. I'll get into it. So,
well,
yeah.
Let me ask you this, just real quick to that point. If we could go back in time and talk to 17-year-old Brian, what did Brian want to be when he grew up?
Well, 17-year-old Brian was sporting a Datsun 240Z. I think I got you a picture of it. My very indulgent old man. That's the replay. So
okay.
That's the one I bought a few years ago, which was a far better car than the Rust Bucket that I had. That first one, I think I shot you a picture of it sitting on my parents' front lawn. That car was so many stories of me and my dad bonding. Just as I got into high school, I met this kid, this family. There it is. That's it right there. So all that stuff that's painted black is covering up rust.
Nice.
That was a fun car. It had a glass pack on it. I thought I was so cool, sliding into Lisa Davis's house late at night, dropping her off at a date, turning the motor off, coasting in. Then I had to start the thing in the driveway, but whatever.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. My dad and I, that car was such a rust bucket. We were working on it. I had no skills back then, right? I didn't know how to weld. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. We took my mom's cookie sheets, cut the rust out, trimmed them to fit, seam sealed and riveted, then fiberglassed over them for the front floorboards in that car.
Cookie sheets.
Cookie sheets. So it's appropriate. It's Christmas time. This is in the summer. Christmas time rolls around. Mom is like, where are my cookie sheets? Dad and I are like, no idea. They're in the floorboard of the Z car. He helped me buy that car. I bought that car. So it's 1979 when I got that car. And it's not very old. It's 7 years old, but it's completely rusted out. Western New York, the salt,
Sure.
recycled Japanese metal. I bought it. I was working as a janitor at this establishment, and you know, cleaning toilets and all that stuff. And the woman who managed it, it was her husband's car, and they had just bought a brand new Scirocco, and they put it up for sale. And I was looking for my first car. I was like, I gotta have this. This is the stories I love about my father. My mom was wonderful, but she was a car chick, absolutely. But dad was the indulgent one, and he told mom he was going away to Albany, where for they had the superintendent's meeting, they had to go, and he's like, "We're gonna buy that Datsun. Don't sweat it." I'm like, "Okay, I got it." He goes, "Just don't talk to your mother about it. It's done, right?" Car was $2,200. I took my 1,100, his 1,100. We go to, I go buy the car. He goes out of town. I go buy the car. I bring it home, right? I park
Yeah.
it in the driveway. A lime green Datsun 240Z. Mom walks out, right? There's no cell phones. She can't call dad, right? Like hands on her hip. That's not what your father said. I'm getting. He said he was getting a sensible 6-cylinder hatchback. And I'm like, it is. It's, but that's yeah. She warmed up to that car. So and I mean my parents, may they rest in peace, were a wonderful couple. Met when they were really really young. Went through a lot of stuff together. Didn't have a lot, and they were really awesome to me and my sisters. My sister's a Volkswagen girl, so like
Okay.
she's had dozens of Beetles. I couldn't keep count. Uh, so when I got into college, I'm a freshman in college.
What did you want to do, Brian?
Well, I wanted to go to, I always wanted to be in business. When I was a kid, like mid-teens, right? Tween. I'm sitting there and I knew I wanted to race. I grew up in Watkins Glen, New York. I got Watkins Glen posters and memorabilia all over the shop here. My favorite racetrack in the world. First race was there. I mean, I saw the greats there. I was there for the Law to Hunt battle. I mean, as a kid, I was a high school photographer, took pictures of that, and I digress. But so I grew up on this wonderful era of motorsports in this small little town that the world came to once a year. Formula One came to Watkins Glen, New York.
Wow.
Right? So I go off to the big city of Rochester, which is not that big of a metropolitan.
Rochester, isn't that north of Canada? No, I'm kidding.
It feels like it is. You can see Canada from there. You can definitely see it from Buffalo. And it's my freshman year, and the Datsun isn't holding up well, right? It's rotting out. So that spring, and this is back when, the student loan world was very different than we hear in the media today.
Mhm.
So I went and got a student loan. And at that time, they would send the money to the bursar's office, and you'd go down, and then you could just take the cash out. Because I got the student, right? So
I know where this is going. I think.
I go down and I get, I couldn't find a picture of it to send you. So I go down, get a student loan, take the money out of the bursar's office, go to the Buick Triumph dealer, and come home with a brand new leftover 1979 Triumph Spitfire. Now,
Wow.
right, I'm thinking, first year business major, this is a genius move, right?
That's kind of Dustin Hoffman-ish, The Graduate image. That's what I'm thinking. But anyway, wow, that's a sophisticated and ballsy move for a young man.
Exactly. So I think I even did the day two thing, and I had upgraded at that point in my life from 8-track to cassette, baby. So I get this thing to go home for the weekend. All proud. I lived my parents were an hour and a half from there. I drive the Spitfire home, top down spring day, probably listen to Springsteen or, Lord knows what. Picked up my girlfriend, Lisa, right? She's still in high school. Roll over to my parents' house. My dad comes out. Where's your car? There's my car. Tell him the story, right? Immediately, we have to talk. Now, this is where my dad taught me about loan sharking. He immediately paid off the student loan, informed me that when I get back to school, I will be finding a job, and I will be paying him on that car usury interest rates until it was paid off. And I paid that car off literally as I graduated. So I guess there's my first lesson in the car business. got out of school, got in the liquor business, worked for Gallo Wine, had a long career with Seagram's.
As a sales guy?
As a sales guy, started as a sales guy and ended up as the national brand manager. And here's where stuff gets crazy. I sent you some other pictures. I did a lot of stuff. Ran at one point in time, ran all through the South in the all through the country in sales, ended up in the South, ended up going to New York City. And at one point in time, I was running events and I was doing all the country music tours for Seagram, for Crown Royal. So we had John Michael Montgomery, Shelley Wright, all those icons, Mark Chestnut, Gary Allen, who's still big today. Gary was opening act on our tour in '94. I'm still friends with him today, and he's a car nut. Yeah, there's Mullet Brian with John Michael Montgomery.
Wow.
That's back when I had hair.
That is awesome. I love it.
Yeah, still have the beard. Oh, it's just great. And that was a ton of fun. And about that time, that's when I was, as in event marketing, I was trying to get Seagram and the brands into motorsports. At this point in time, I'm amateur racing a Porsche, for fun, running SCCA, running a lot of Porsche stuff. Got real heavy into vintage racing, just because I like the era of stuff. And had done some experimenting. We looked at getting there's the very first car. Yeah, Topeka, Kansas, and a win. So that was a good little car. That car today, that's a short wheelbase 1966 911, and I sold it for like 20 grand.
And look at the tail on that. What is a whale tail? I don't know. I mean, just look at that thing.
That was a factory IROC whale tail. They were 55 inches wide. I actually transferred it to the blue car later, and then that car evolved as well. But the price of that thing is crazy. I know where that car is too, but the guy will not part with it. He restored it back to a street car. It's a short wheelbase 911. They're worth a fortune now, as you know.
Oh God, yeah.
But just anyway, back to my story. I couldn't get Seagram to get into motorsports, and then with my event background, there was an opportunity in Seagram to work in the tequila category. We launched Margaritaville Tequila. I did the licensing deal with Jimmy Buffett and his folks.
I was going to say Jimmy Buffett, the incredible branding and marketing of that guy
who we just lost. Who was a car guy, 280 SE convertible with a 4.5 in it. I mean, car guys are everywhere.
Absolutely.
And he was a NASCAR fan. He and Bobby Labonte are pals, or I guess they still are. I mean, just because you die doesn't mean you lose your friendships.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and that was a blast. But that party came to an end when the Bronfman family, who owns Seagram, decided to sell out, and they were selling it to Diageo. And Diageo, I don't know if you know, owns Cuervo.
Yep.
We came out and took 11% market share away from Cuervo, and they did not like that brand, and they weren't picking it up in the acquisition. And I was literally out of a job.
Crazy. And how about, and just if I can, not to sidetrack, but I am familiar with Diageo through business stuff, did some work for them. And what brand do they not own? I mean, from Smirnoff to Guinness, it's incredible. The acquisitions they made. Anyway, go ahead.
And great and wonderful brands. They're a great company.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I have this weird little tie-in between my past, present, and future, I hope. So I was reading this book called The 5 O'Clock Club, because I didn't know what I was doing. I'm living in Manhattan, right? I'm a car guy in Manhattan with an M3, right? I'm paying more to park the car than the payment was.
What era are we talking about now?
This is 98 to 2000 and 2001.
Okay, that makes sense. Just trying to get a feel for timeline. Go ahead.
I'm in New York. I'm transitioning. I'm leaving Seagram about 2000, moving to Connecticut so I could. At the time, I had the blue race car was out in Phoenix, of all places, and I'm racing the West Coast, flying and driving in like I'm freaking Dario Franchitti or somebody.
So wait, tell me you moved to Connecticut for Lime Rock.
I moved to Connecticut because I was living on the Upper East Side of New York as a car guy, and it was driving me nuts. I needed space.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Lime Rock's a great track. Lime Rock, actually, Lime Rock is a wonderful track. Lime Rock is where I went to the Skip Barber School.
Good timing. Okay. When is that about?
Uh, so I did that when I was living there, and I
Okay.
was racing this blue 3-liter RSR Tribute, having a blast. And I'm like, what am I gonna do, man? I mean, sometimes you get lost, right?
Yeah.
Men we get lost occasionally. Where am I going to go? I only know one thing. I'm only the liquor business. Diageo doesn't want me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in a panic. And my ex-wife, very smart woman, says, "You like racing? Why don't you go figure it out? Pick up this book, the 5 o'clock Book Club, which is all about networking. It works in huge major cities like in New York. You go and it's like group therapy for job hunters, and they interview you." And I kept talking about racing, and they're like, "Well, why don't you find out more about racing? Why don't you go to work in racing?" I'm like, "I live in New York City." One of the guys is like, "I work for, I forget what ad agency they work. The NASCAR Corp sponsorship marketing offices are across the street from us. You ready for this? 375 Park Avenue. 375 Park Avenue is a very significant building, and it's a Mies van der Rohe building, full block, half block setback, gorgeous building, four-season restaurant in the bottom end. It's known as the Seagram building. But I
Right.
work at 803rd at Seagram at a different building.
That's crazy.
Ultimately, I get hired by NASCAR, and I'm working in the Seagram building.
What did you get hired at doing at
I
NASCAR?
got hired as a director of sponsorship marketing. That because and now remember, Crown had just come into the sport in IROC, so they gave me Anheuser Busch. They figured they were going to NASCAR wasn't ready to take on distilled spirits just yet. They wanted the teams to benefit from that sponsorship
Right.
money. So, but they brought me on because I was in that world, and they knew I was trying to get us into IndyCar, but that's a personal passion.
Right.
So I'm in New York working for NASCAR. This is great fun. You know, really wonderful, great brands I worked with. I had GM as an account, Coca-Cola, Block Drug, which is Goody's headache powder. Met some fantastic people that I'm absolutely still friends with today. But it came a time, one of my biggest client was America Online. Remember good old AOL?
You've got mail.
Yep. So AOL, I hit it off with their agency. And inside the agency with one guy who eventually was literally directing all AOL sports marketing. And
Okay.
they had just made a huge investment in racing and in college sports.
Okay.
And Gravity Sports Marketing, Mark Shelday, his nickname's the Viking. He's the one that nicknamed me the Brian Barr.
The Brian Barr.
He was the Viking. So the Viking, Mark, convinced me, leave Connecticut, come on down, manage our motorsports assets in Charlotte, North Carolina. We were doing some things with Sarah Fisher and IndyCar, but they were spending double-digit millions a year in sponsorships, activation, and we negotiate all that. Remember the 30 car at Childress, Steve Clark, Jeff Green, all those guys. I negotiated all those deals, managed their day-to-day relationships, and then had a team that was going to every single racetrack, 36 of them, with a tractor trailer that folded out triple, had 5 huge satellite dishes, and we were the internet at racetracks. It was long before these things worked, right?
That's fascinating. Quick question. Why Charlotte, Brian? What?
It's the motorsports hub. And,
Okay.
Childress was here.
Yeah.
Mark said I could live anywhere. The company office was in Colorado. And I'm like, okay, I'll move to Colorado. He's like, well, I'm here. You don't need to move here. So I came down here. I liked it. Looked around and ended up, coming up here up by Lake Norman. Been here. This is the longest place I've lived anywhere in my entire life. Love it.
And when was that you moved?
May of 2003.
Okay, so
we're coming up on 21 years here.
Coming up on 21 years. Wow.
And our first office was in the Speedway. So grabbing
Incredible.
sports marketing, when you walk up to the speedway on that main
Yeah.
tower where the flags are, we were on the fourth floor. My office was that whole wide office overlooked the entrance to the speedway.
So let me ask you this, because you're in NASCAR country, but it sounds like you were doing sort of a diversified portfolio of automotive events. What role did or did not NASCAR play? Was it F1? Was it IndyCar? Go ahead.
So I've been an F1 IndyCar fan. If I had to rank my passions, I love open wheel racing. I love sports car prototype racing, flat out the most. I mean, that's the models I'm surrounded by in here. That's what I modeled my RSR after that I built. It wasn't a real one, but it was quick. And I always loved road racing, and I loved the NASCAR side of road racing. And I think I started to talk before in the early 70s. My whole family, when we moved to Watkins Glen or moved to Horseheads by Watkins Glen, we switched into the European cars. That car was silly fast. That's mid Ohio. That car was on the podium, won or DNF. There was no in between on it. It was crazy fast.
And for folks watching, that's Brian in the cockpit, correct?
Yep. Oh yeah, that's me in the cockpit. That helmet is sitting over across the shop.
Wow.
Yeah, that car was such a fun car to drive. And that
Okay.
that big old Evo wing on the back, that car was so cheated up, man. It was that wing was good for like a second and a half a lap versus
No
the tail.
kidding.
I had kept that whale tail off of the white car when I sold the white car.
Incredible.
But that was a ton of fun. I'm racing in NASCAR because of running the AOL line business. NASCAR.com initially was a partnership between AOL, Time
Warner?
no, not Time Warner, Ted Turner, CNN, right? The
CNN,
Turner
yeah.
Network, Turner Networks, right? And NASCAR, and that's how all that came together. That's how I met John. I mean, I became friends with John Oates because we had him down at the Grand Marshal at Daytona.
As in Darrell Hall and John Oates?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Wow.
I got to get. There's a guitar that's my other hobby in the music room that he signed for me. There's also one from BB King, which is a whole nother story for another day. We could have a guitar show.
We did something. You remember that one event we did, but yeah, I digress. I do think we should do a podcast on music and cars. But anyway, that's episode 2, Brian. But no, keep going.
I go to pick John up, in a golf cart because you can get to the airport on a golf cart in Daytona. Not legal, but you can do it.
Oh yeah.
So I go to pick John up, flying in on a private plane. Gets off, and he's a rock star, and I had talked to him before. I didn't believe it the first time I had a conference call with him that he was actually on the phone. The Viking I thought was pulling my leg. The quick story. So it's all set up, and John and Mark had known each other because from skiing in Aspen, and in that social circle. And he always told me, because just be cooler about John. Don't be a geek. Just be a normal guy. Because I happen to love Hall & Oates, right? My band, we cover She's Gone, all that stuff. And we cover She's Gone as part of the story. So
classic.
I'm on a conference call. There's no Zoom back then, right? And there's this guy on the phone, right? And he keeps in Schulte's like, no, it's John Oates. And I'm like, I'm a doubting Thomas. I'm like, no, it is not John Oates. John Oates is not there. I'm like, if it's John Oates, that guy owes me money because every time I broke up, I went through so much vinyl playing She's Gone. And he just starts he just starts laughing and he starts singing the song. And I'm like, oh my God, how embarrassing. That's John Oates. So now 2 weeks later, I got to pick the guy up at the airport after making just a complete fool out of myself. Right?
But he probably loved it.
He did. So he gets off the airplane and we joked a little bit about that. And I just said to him, I said, so, I know you bought a Porsche Turbo, right? When you kind of finally hit it. And he's like, oh yeah, casual outside. But dude, you got to tell me what it was like racing IMSA back in the 80s. He raced for Huffaker Engineering in a Fiero. And he's like, who knows that? And I'm like, I do. I'm a car geek. And that's just solidified, our friendship. It's not like he's coming over to my house for Christmas, but he's a good dude. He's just a good car guy. Cotter even included him in his book called Rockin' Garages. So
yep. Now, what you just touched on something, Brian, which a guy like you who's had this incredible odyssey in the industry, I mean, would you agree that of all the things, we can talk sports, we can talk religion, politics, we can talk colleges, we can talk music, but to be a car guy or car girl, it's like the common ground, the language, the bonding. You can be anywhere and you'll see someone light up when you ask them about their Corvette or their Porsche. Uh, would you agree with that? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. We said it back early on in the opening. Yeah, the cars are cool, but they're just an icebreaker to hear people's interesting stories. And
Yeah.
everybody really has an interesting story. I don't think my stuff's that unique. I've done a lot of crazy stuff. I'm still not sure how it happened, and I hope it continues.
The
Uh,
John Oates thing really threw me for a loop, but no, so good stuff, Brian. Let me ask you this. So fast forward a bit if you can. I know you, I didn't know all of that, which what an incredible story. How did you make the transition from the active motorsports, events, marketing, Seagrams, all of these things into inventory management, automotive sales, collectible cars? Go ahead.
so the after I got out of NASCAR, I worked for a couple of race teams. I worked for DEI. I worked for Robbie Gordon. We had done all this stuff in the agency world with Andretti Green and IndyCar. That's how I actually met and ultimately lost my best friend, Dan Weldon. Very
Oh dear.
tragic story. Still friends with his, very dear friends with his wife. Go to all the kids' races I can. Sebastian, look out for that kid. He's going to win the Indy 500. I predict he's going to win the Indy 500 within the next 6 years. He's 14. You heard it here first, people.
Talent is talent.
He won the F4. He won the Barber F4 championship this year.
Wow.
Anyway, so there's the big correction, the market correction, sponsorship marketing. Remember, we used to like the Tide car was the Tide car. There weren't any
Yeah,
other brands on it except Associates.
that's
Well,
right.
when the laws changed, things fractionalized. Corporate America just changed how they looked at sponsorship. And as you started to get cars like AOL pulled out of the sport completely, you started to have, oh, I'll buy 8 races, I'll buy 9 races, I'll buy 6 races. And I'm not going to lie, I was well compensated. And I couldn't just deliver the same results in that economy, in that fractionalized, you know, marketplace. The whole thing retracted
The whole model changed, didn't it?
completely, which
Mm,
is really, again, here I find myself, another point in my career. Wait, what? The rug got pulled out from underneath me. This is my dream.
yeah.
What do I do? I'm in racing. Well, and it was 2000 and gosh, what about, let's see. My last stint in motorsports was with USF1. So I've worked in Formula One too. Uh, the defunct one, not the successful one over at Haas. And when the statute of limitations is up, there will be a book. Uh, the one that everybody joked about with toasters. Right about that time, it was about 12 or 13. Things are fractionalizing, they're falling off. Uh, and I decided, well, I'll just go figure this out on my own, right? If the big agencies are downsizing and the teams aren't going to internalize their sponsorship, sales process. So we started a small agency called B4 because we all had B in our name. Before you call anybody, call B4.
Creative. I like it.
And it was fun and it was great. And I picked up a client called JJ Best Bank,
Hmm.
a specialty car financing and airplane and yacht and all that stuff. And as our agency faced the same struggles that the big agents did, we thought we could do it without overhead and all that stuff. We couldn't. JJ Best Bank, we kind of split the company up, the agency up. I walked away with JJ Best Bank as a client and had a great run with them, which is how I met the folks at Streetside, and that's how Bob Donna ended up hiring me. They were a customer, and
Streetside Classics.
Streetside Classics, where I am today. That's where I'm the inventory manager right now, amongst all the other, we all got to have side hustles, from appraising cars to taking things to concours, the super secret thing I told you about.
Right.
All that stuff's just, it's a blast. But I'm around it every day. It's like being like a kid in a candy store.
Well, so let me ask you this, and maybe this is a good time to shift gears, so to speak, Brian. And fascinating story. Thank you for that. We could probably spend 3 hours on the Brian Barr story. Um,
Well, you and
you
I,
know,
the audience might fall asleep.
well, you've heard the podcast. Wait till the book comes out. But no, in all seriousness, or the Netflix series. Uh, Brian, let's shift gears. So I think your credentialing speaks for itself. I value your perspective, and so do a lot of other people in the community and our listeners. Question for you. What's the state of the collectible car market? Is this a good time to buy a car? From my perspective, I've seen some wild dynamics, as we all have, pre-COVID, COVID, the flipping dynamics, everyone getting rich flipping cars, to skyrocketing interest rates and maybe a downturn. Brian, what the heck is going on with the collectible car market?
It's overall, I mean, it's very volatile. There's a lot, we're in an election year. There's a lot of different things going on. There's certain market segments that are outperforming others. Your blue chip cars are always going 300 SLs, right? The, well, we just saw the Ferrari GTO, but even the Ferrari GTO missed estimate, right? By $20 million.
Oh,
So
is that all?
yeah, it sold for 50 something instead of 7. It's still worth every penny.
Mhm.
In my opinion, so those cars are always going to be there. They're always going to do well. Haggerty even had, which is a wonderful company, it
Oh, yeah.
even has all these market indicators by it. We're right now in what I like to call like a post-COVID hangover.
Okay.
So the market went crazy. There were speculators in there. Some people got caught holding the bag. Guys who were dabbling in that, right, are clearly they're upside down on some cars.
Okay.
And my advice to anybody when you buy a car is buy a car you love.
Mm.
Don't try and do what I do and because I'm thinking about product mix. How many four-wheel drives do I have to have? One of these Chevys, Fords, Mopars. Where's my Mopar? Don't try and be the guy that speculator. Buy what you love and buy the best example that you can find. Don't try and time and speculate the market because those are the people right now, especially those who took loans out that are upside down on a collectible. Now, not going to put them in any sort of real financial uh, predicament, but the guys that are taking the losses are the guys who aren't in love with the car. I thought Mopars were hot, so I bought one. Right? Well, what do you like? I really love Jaguars. Well, you should have bought
Now you're married to it.
one because
Yeah.
now you're married to it. Uh, Overall, we're probably in a 10 or 12% decline off of last year. However, like right now, quarter on quarter, I'm par with what last year was.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we had this huge uptake.
COVID.
COVID.
Yeah.
Name your price, right? It's like that other insurance company, right? Name your price, you can get it. And it's corrected back to that same trajectory it was. So if we're here and we had this big spike, right?
Yeah.
If you take COVID out, the trend's positive. We're ahead of where we were before COVID.
Interesting.
Now, certain tastes are changing, right? You've got, um, and this is, we all have to face our mortality, right? I have more cars in estates right now than I've ever seen before. And those are some tough conversations to have with the remaining spouse on the value of their automobile, what they saw their significant other put into it, and what its real value is.
Mm.
Certain style hot rods from the 30s, like the traditional Don Spence Roadsters, things like we've seen in American Graffiti, those kind of like iconic builds, they're doing good. But some of these crazy, remember the ZZ Top Eliminator car?
Oh my God. Yes.
That car is complete. Now that car is always going to be worth something, but the people that went down that style path with the tweed
The
interiors,
clones.
right? those cars, just the market value is not there. I've even
So
seen.
it's just out. Let me ask you a couple questions of that. Is it just a style and trend thing? It's out of favor?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a style and trend, and that's out of favor, and that's going to happen, in my opinion, across the board as we see this stuff. Like,
Hmm.
everybody used to buy a crate 350, put a turbo 350 or turbo 400 behind it, right? So I put a 12 bolt in it, right? Power
Yeah.
front, this part, right? Right. Then it became put an LT1 in. Then it's like you
Ah,
saw these early LS swaps. Now people are like, oh, it only has an LS1 in it. Oh my God, that's built so long ago. And if you
isn't
think
that
about
crazy?
it, yeah,
Hmm.
it's crazy. And that's always gonna, whatever the next engine swap that's out there, right? That's right. It's at some point something's going to be dated. And then in my business, we've got. I think about this and I look at my customers. So I've got things that we typically wouldn't have had. I've brought some JDM cars in, Nissan Stasia, Miatas, right? Got a GTR. That's a different audience than traditionally would come to a muscle car showroom, which is what our bread and butter is.
It's also a different generation,
Mm-hmm. And
right? I mean,
I want
by
them to
by a
be,
decade or three.
yeah, I
Good.
want I want your son to be shopping at Streetside with whatever he think is cool, and I got to have one of those. What it is when I figure it out, I'm a genius, right?
Well, what that sounds like to me is a good business evolution and smart evolution instead of stagnant and you're married to the 50s, 60s, and 70s era. And
Right.
let's face it, you just said it, the trends, things change over time with the generations. It sounds like you're evolving. Is that a growth market, catering to, dare I say, the 80s, 90s, and maybe early 2000s babies?
The Radwood stuff it's wildly popular. Now the market value has shifted on it, but the passion in that group, and
Oh
that
yeah.
their lifestyle event marketing things. Like if you ever been to a Radwood show, it blow your mind how
Mm.
they approach it. Like literally in costume. It's like going to Burning Man for cars or something. Not that I've ever, I want to go. Uh, it's so you got to think about those trends, think about the product mix. You know, bread and butter, Chevelles and Mustangs and Corvettes and Camaros and all those things are good. But then, and I know you kind of dig these, I dig them, right? Monte Carlo SSs, the Pontiac
Oh,
Euro Coupes, the GNXs, the Grand Nationals. The money that those are bringing now, even taking out the COVID inflation, it's crazy. That's a desirable car that a dude couldn't afford, and now he can because he's got some disposable income, and the kids aren't in car seats, and he can throw them in the back and take them to soccer and look cool.
some of us who grew up in that era, I'll say most of us, many of us, depending on what you're into, but I mean, you said it. The SS Montes, the Grand Nationals, are you kidding me? So iconic. The Fiero, the GT, it's funny because a lot of us, and now we're getting sidetracked, but I love it, and I think you probably do too. Those of us who are, into the muscle cars and the V8 bigots, dare I say, when the Fiero came out, we
Yeah.
scoffed at it. We
Right.
scoffed at it and we laughed at it. Then the Fiero GT came out the last couple of years, and as a guy who loved Trans Ams, I almost saw it as a baby Trans Am. Fast forward to today, if I saw a Survivor, Brian, last couple year Fiero GT, I think at a car show, I think I'd gravitate towards that ahead of most Ferraris, McLarens, Porsches. I mean,
We
they're
had one
just,
like a year ago, and it got amazing interest.
yeah.
Right? The Camaros, I rock in the SS Camaros. Right? That's it. There is a lot of fun for the dollar in
Yeah.
those. So I mean, you get in the import side of it. That me, my Porsche habit. I'm a
Oh
recovering.
yeah.
The 944s, 944 turbos and stuff. Those are the affordables. 928s, 928s are roll on an uptake. Great cars. So,
Can I tell a Brian Barr story?
uh,
You may or may not remember this, and you probably don't remember it the way I do. A couple few years ago, you showed up at one of our Sunday morning coffee meets in the Charlotte area, and you brought a McLaren 12C.
yes.
You know where I'm going. Guys, let me tell you something. Brian showed up, and of course, there was nothing at this little coffee meet anywhere near as exotic as the 12C that Brian showed up in downtown Waxhaw, North Carolina, mind you.
With straight pipes, no cats.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Let's say it's 9 o'clock in the morning. Maybe it's 8:30. There's a buzz around Brian's 12C. So he starts it up and proceeds to rev it. I think you woke up all of Union County, North Carolina.
People want to hear it.
Listen, I loved it. I still remember it. I think everybody else does too.
I had a lot of fun demos, and that's a wonderful company that I work for. I miss and am friends with all those guys at Paramount, at Foreign Cars Charlotte. Like, great group of guys, and I was in a wonderful situation there where I had access to a lot of cool demos. That McLaren here in the neighborhood, right? Because the thing sounded just wicked. I mean, that was the car that the neighbors actually questioned me, because by now I've been rolling home in Huracans and Ferraris and all that stuff. This thing's now loud. They're like, "What do you do?" You see, it says FD. That's franchise dealer, not the kind of dealer you're thinking.
He either sells pharmaceuticals, maybe drugs, or something else.
That was a lot of fun. That's a good group. Well, you know Tony and his dad.
Oh yeah,
great group of guys. The car business, as competitive as we all are, we're a pretty tight knit community.
And it's a small world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you get into specialty cars and stuff like that. But even I've got buddies who are working at traditional Chrysler, Jeep, or Volkswagen dealers, and if you're working at a dealership, you got some level of car passion.
Oh, you have to. So we could do this all night, but I want to put you on the hot seat.
Okay.
Brian, you ready? I'm going to ask you a couple questions, rapid fire style, and just tell us what you think. What's on Brian's do not buy right now list? Not that you're throwing shade at it, but just you say, this is not the time to buy this car. What's on your list?
I would caution on oddball stuff unless you love it. Right? So, and that could be Studebaker Hawks, Chrysler Newports, all interesting cars, right? But you got to love it. That's not a car that you're going to make money on it. And as we talked a little bit, I call it the fat fender era, the 30s and 40s, they can look cool, like Willis's and all that stuff. Values, they're cool.
But the Al Capone cars.
Yes, those kind of things. If you love it and that's what you dig and that's your vibe, buy it. But if you're looking to make money on it long term, those are the kind of things. Personally, I just don't think I'd go for it. We sell them though. It's all price value relationship, as in anything.
Got it. Sounds like sound advice. What's on Brian's buy it now list? Like, these are hot cars and they're trending up. What's on your list? Buy
it smart. You're good in the import world. You are good with your exotics. The prancing horse is always going to do well. The Ferrari. 911s, this safari trend, I think, like the patina trend, is going to play out, but I still think
Land Rover, Land Cruiser, is that what you're talking about?
No, like when you see guys safari and 911s and safari.
Oh, okay.
I think that's kind of a cool trend right now that you could have a lot of fun with, and there's demand for. So the bread and butter muscle cars are still out there. The stuff that the Hot Wheels that we played with, that we built the models, we can now have the adult version. And that stuff, and again, but love them. You gotta, like, if you like a 70 Chevelle, get a 70 Chevelle. Don't settle for a 69,
Yeah.
So.
Question for you, because, unlike guys of a certain age like you and I, now that we're over 30, Brian, I'll leave it at that. But no, in all seriousness, there's a bunch of cats out there who say, how do I become the next Brian Barr? This man has had a wild and fascinating journey in the automotive industry. How the heck do I get started? What's your advice to young people who want to get into the industry but have no idea how?
I started too late. This is literally my automotive, my motorsports automotive career is my second career. It's been my longest career, by far. But if you love what it's cliche, but if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. You know, and dive in, learn about the cars, be humble, listen, don't be critical, man. I fall into it. You're like, oh man, I can't. Oh, why would a guy buy that thing, right? But the guy who's driving it loves it. So be right. You know what I drive. People, I know a lot of people go, huh? Right? But 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 I love it, right? I
Are
love
we
it.
talking about the Dragon Wagon?
Yeah, we're talking about that Mercedes-Benz AMG E63S station wagon. Wagons are
I
built.
always say 0 to groceries in under 3 seconds, but that's just me.
Wagons are built to haul stuff. That one hauls.
100%. Speaking of that, last one I want to put you on the spot for, Brian. I don't know if I can ask you this question. I'm kind of interested in the answer because you've kind of been there and done that. Maybe you've had it all and done it all, from McLarens to muscle cars to every Porsche imaginable. What's got Brian's eye right now? If maybe you're already shopping for something, you've got the Dragon Wagon. Like what's the next car for Brian, or at least something you've got your eye on that you say, man, that needs to be in my garage?
It's one of two cars. So the next modern car, right? Because there's two buckets in this, right? There's my vintage brain, right, and then there's my modern. The Dragon Wagon is very hard to get rid of, and I've entertained that. I've decided, nope, I'm going to hang on to it for a little bit. But I want a post 17 Aston Martin Vantage.
With the AMG motor, is that?
Of course, yeah, or an AMG GT. So I love both those cars. I think the Aston's prettier car. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of seat time in both of those. My heritage is British and French. I don't want a Peugeot, so the Aston would tick off that box. I would take an Alpine A110 though. See, that's how and the first person that can show us a picture of one of those wins a Streetside hat.
How about a Renault Le Car? Let's have a whole other episode about French cars.
Sure, an R5 turbo, and there's two in town. That's the crazy stuff that I just know where these things are, and I don't find them; they find me. It's weird. Now, going vintage, hands down, a Ferrari 250 GT Lusso. I think that is the prettiest car ever made. Not
hard to argue.
Not particularly fast. And if I not in Lusso, if I wanted to be a little fast, a little cooler, and I've only ever driven one, and I sold it when I was at Foreign Car Charlotte, a 365 Daytona, 365 GTC, one of 11 in this pale yellow, beautiful car.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, terrible at low speeds and parking, but man, what a GT cruiser. I could see myself smoking a cigar, rolling, into Monaco on that one for an F1 weekend.
Strangely enough, I can see it as well. Well, listen, Brian, first of all, thank you. I'm blown away, and we got to get you back on, maybe again and again. Just an incredible story, incredible perspective. Can't thank you enough. Brian, where can we find you? Talk to us about all the things that the Brian Barr does, and how do we get a hold of you?
The Brian, but that is my Instagram handle. You can find me on Facebook too, just Brian Barr. I'll pop up. It's either me or some attorney in London. So I'm at Streetside Classics. I'm the inventory manager there. I love to talk cars, so shout me there. It's brian.barr at Streetside Classics. If you got a question there, that's cool. If you want to hit me up, just talk about guitars or whatever stuff, bhbar@me.com. So I'm certainly on Insta, Facebook. That's where I'm hanging out. And you've seen some of them. I just have fun cruising through car shows on my longboard.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you, Brian. Absolutely incredible, folks. Thank you for tuning in to the Hot Seat Automotive Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe. Brian will be talking to you soon, and have a good one, everybody. Thank you.